I think like one of the biggest trad.
Lila can't say tragedy. It's
I
hilarious.
literally cannot. I always say trad.
Strategy.
Hi, I'm Lila,
And I'm Chansey.
and this is for Criming Out Loud.
Welcome to episode 10. I forgot which
Yeah, it is
episode we were
episode
on
10.
for a second.
Yep.
We're a little bit ahead, so I forgot.
Yeah, we are a little bit ahead, so when we talk about what we're about to talk about, if it's completely out of context now, then just pretend this was like 2 weeks ago for you guys. The Olympics are happening right now in Paris.
Yeah.
And
Paris.
yeah, not that I can speak any other language but my own. Actually, I can't even speak my own. So, but yeah, Paris. It's gotta be pretty cool. I was watching some of them on Peacock, and I was kind of like, how cool would it be to have used that as an excuse to go to Paris?
Yeah. Just like I'm gonna go to Paris and also see the Olympics for like one of the days, and then just like chill in Paris for forever.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I bet it's so busy.
Oh,
No.
yeah, it's got to be
I'm gonna
insane.
avoid
It's
there.
got to be like not
Yeah.
even travelable. Travelable.
Travelable. What a great made up word.
Yeah, I think that's
I've heard
yeah.
stories. Yep. I've heard stories of because Utah, where we grew up, used to it hosted the Winter Olympics like forever ago. I don't remember when. But they're gonna be
It
hosting
was
them
2002.
again.
Sorry.
Yeah. I
It
think
was
you're right.
2002, I
It
think.
was like early 2000s.
Yeah.
But people that lived here at that time said that it was miserable for those 17 days because of how just jam-packed like hotels and everything were, and like you couldn't get anywhere.
Oh,
And
I'm
I was
sure.
like, oh my goodness. Hopefully I'm
But
not living in
also
Utah when that happens again.
because like we live close enough to Salt Lake City that it's only like a couple hours away. I'm like tempted to like attend the Olympics
I know. It
when
would be
they come
cool.
again, because I'm like that would like there's some of the like events and stuff that I'm like it'd be freaking cool.
Some of the like the snow ones, like
Yeah.
the skiing and the snowboarding and stuff would be really cool. I think they do those in Park City. That would be really
Yeah.
cool to go see.
Also, like having grown up in Utah, I was kind of like I was kind of curious. I was like, what happens if we have a bad snow year that year? Like, what
Yeah.
if we get no, because that happens sometimes. So, like,
Yeah.
what if we get no snow and it's like, I'm sure they just bring it in from somewhere. I'm sure they figure it out. I don't know how that
Yeah, I mean
works,
they make it happen. I don't
but
know. I don't know the logistics of that. They just make snow. They make it snow somehow.
Yeah, maybe.
Snow
It's
machine.
possible. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, Olympics are pretty cool.
There's just so many different events in the Olympics I didn't know were a thing. I was at a restaurant yesterday and they were playing the Olympics, like different events on like 6 different screens. And there was like water polo, which looks impossible, by the way. People are just like drowning each other trying to get the ball to the goal.
They have to
that's
tread
pretty
water
cool.
and also like pass the ball, and I'm like, I
And
can't even
also you're
swim,
having
so
yeah, exactly. And you're having other like the opposite team, they're like shoving you under the water to try and like get the ball from you or like
I know.
swim
And
past
as I
you.
was
It's like,
thinking
oh
that, I was
great.
like, do you think anybody's killed anybody in water polo, like drowned them by accident, like held them under the water too long? I'm like, how would you know? You're just like holding on to them, and then all of a sudden it's just like limp, and you're like, oh no.
Limping. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I'm sure that's never
There's
happened, but I
also
was like,
yeah, it looks really hard. And the US team, I don't remember if they won or not. I wasn't paying super attention because I was super focused on this other event, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's like grappling, and I was like, this is so fascinating.
You know what
so
else
crazy.
is like very similar to that? I don't know, maybe it's the same thing, but they called it judo.
Judo.
And it was wild. Like, I did not understand the rules at all. I was, like, watching it, and it was, like, they, like, just grabbed onto each other
Yes, that's what I was
and
watching.
just, like, kind of, like nothing really happened. They just, like, kind of
No.
like, they even just, like, grabbed their clothes, and they would just kinda circle each other, grabbing their clothes, and then, like, one of them would kind of fall to the floor, and then they'd, like, call it and make them break apart, and I was like, "What's happening?" But I
Yeah.
Googled it, and apparently judo is, like the goal is to flip the opponent, but there's, like, a ton of rules. So, it's, like, really easy to basically, like, foul and get it to, like, start over.
Yeah, 'cause there was two guys that I was watching, one from Moldova and one from, I think it was Romania or something somewhere like that, and they both kept getting fouls and nobody was scoring. Because I think you only get 1
Mhm.
point. I think the first person to score wins, right? Like, you just flip the opponent.
This must be a
But
different one
they
because the one I was watching, they could get it was a time limit, and they can get
Okay.
as many
Must be a
points in
different
that
thing.
time limit. Yeah, similar though.
But
Okay.
these guys were like some of these rounds were over in, like, 30 seconds because some of them were, like,
Just flipped
way
them,
better
moved
than
on.
others. They were just, like, flipping them over. And I was like, "Oh
That's
my gosh."
crazy.
And these people would hit the ground so hard. And then there was
You're
this
like,
one guy,
"Ugh."
he had him in, like, an arm bind, and he was, like, about to, like, dislocate his freaking shoulder, and the guy was like, "Tap, tap, tap, tap." It's like, "I don't wanna
He's
break
like,
my
"Please
arm."
don't."
I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is
Oh, that's
intense," but
funny.
it's kinda cool.
Wow. Dude, it is
Cool.
cool.
There's lots of stuff that I didn't know. I didn't know like, this is dumb, but I didn't know volleyball was an Olympic sport. I had no idea that they
Oh,
did that in
really?
the Olympics.
I knew that
So,
one, but yeah, it is crazy, and
it's
soccer.
common sense, but soccer I knew about. I just,
Mhm.
like, had never thought about.
And
I don't
rugby.
Yes, I saw the women's rugby team playing, the US team. I was
Mhm.
like,
We watched
"That's
just like
freaking
a we
cool."
missed it, but we watched a snippet of their little, like the New Zealander thing that they do beforehand that's, like, really aggressive and scary.
Yeah.
I was
The
like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't wanna, like, play them now, like, that was scary. Anyway, so yeah, the Olympics, a good time,
The Olympics. Cool stuff.
and this could have been a better segue had I cut this off sooner, but speaking of our hometown and growing up in
Oh, yeah.
Utah, that's actually where this case that we're talking about today takes place. In fact,
Oh.
I have walked the very street, probably walked past or driven past the exact spot where this crime took place. So that was, like, a little spooky for me. I was like, "Ooh boy, I've been there. This is literally where we grew up," and I had never heard of this case. And it's surprising to me that I never heard of this case because truly, this case is gruesome.
Oh, great.
And, like, honestly, like, before I get into it, it's a robbery that kinda turned a little more intense than it needed to be. Um, if you have a weak stomach, you're not, like, one for the kind of more intense crime stories, maybe skip this episode because I honestly was like as I was doing the research, I was like, "This is a lot. I didn't realize what I was getting myself into here, and this is pretty intense." So, anyway, that's just a
Wow.
little warning. If you're not one for the details, maybe just don't do it on this one, but it is a good case. It is interesting, and I really loved how it ended. I will say that I was like, "These people got justice," and I appreciated that. So, we'll get
Well,
into
that's
it. This is
good.
the Hi-Fi murders. It's called the Hi-Fi
Oh.
murders because this took place at the Hi-Fi shop on Washington Boulevard in Ogden, Utah.
You told me you
And
were gonna do this case, and then I literally forgot.
well, I'm glad you
I was
forgot
like,
because
"What
now
is
it's
going
just
on?"
fresh as a daisy. Anyway, so, basically, I didn't know what a hi-fi shop was because I don't believe they really exist anymore. And it
Don't know
was
what that is.
basically like an audio supply shop. It had, like, stereos and a bunch of different like, just anything you needed for noise, it was there. And so
Like a
that's what a
Radio Shack,
hi-fi yeah, like a Radio Shack, but I guess a little bit more like yeah,
specified.
specified maybe is the vibe I got. So, um, on April 22nd at the hi-fi shop, right before closing time, 3 men decided that they were going to rob the store. And these 3 men, their names were Dale Pierre, William Andrews, and Keith Roberts. And so inside the hi-fi shop, there was Stanley Walker and Michelle Ansley, and they obviously had no clue what was about to happen to them. Stanley was 20 years old at the time, and Michelle, who had just started working there a week earlier, was only 18.
Oh my gosh,
And
so young.
sadly, she was actually like months away. She was engaged and months away from being married.
Oh no.
So, these crooks decided that Pierre, I always want to say Pierre, it's Pierre, right? Pierre, thank you.
Yeah.
Pierre and Andrews. They decided that Pierre and Andrews were going to go inside the store while Roberts was going to stay outside in the van and be a getaway driver. I'm just going to stick this in there. I did see it on only one source. So I don't believe this is the case. One source did say that there was a second van with 3 more men in it that also waited outside. I don't think that was true, but some claim that there was more people involved with this crime than just the 3 of them. I believe it was just the 3 of them. So 2 men go inside, right? That being Pierre and Andrews. And they walk in with handguns and they force Stanley and Michelle into the basement of this shop. And once they're down there, they bind them and they begin to rob the store. They go back upstairs to start robbing it. In the middle of they're starting to rob the store, in walks a 16-year-old, and his name was Courtney Naisbitt. And he actually was not a customer of the store. He was just like a good kid, and he was coming in to thank Stanley for letting him use their parking spaces to park in, even though he wasn't a customer of their store. He'd like needed to run like errands around. There was no other parking, so he parked there and then had like asked if that was okay, and Stanley was like, "Sure, bud, go ahead." And then Courtney was coming back to be like, "Thanks for letting me do that. I'm leaving." And
Wow.
sadly,
A
he
kid
really
filled with
should not.
integrity.
I know. He should not have been that good and that decent because it doesn't
If he
work out
had.
for him. And
Yeah,
I wish it
that's so
did, but
sad.
so he walks in and they do the same thing. They tie him up in the basement and hold him hostage there. And it's kind of becomes unclear at this point, like how long time passes. That didn't make sense. It becomes unclear at this how
I
long
didn't mean
time
to laugh.
passes.
I was
What?
trying.
Okay. At this point, it becomes unclear how much time passes, but it's long enough that these like teenagers' parents start to get worried. And so Orrin Walker, who is Stanley's father, shows up at the store to check on him and like happens to get there at the exact same time as Carol Naisbitt, who is Courtney's mother. And so they both like show up at the same time. They walk in together. I'm sure they were like, "Yeah, I'm worried. I haven't seen them either." And they enter the store and are also taken hostage and tied up in the basement.
Oh my
Now, at this
gosh.
point, like they decide, I guess, that they need to get rid of the hostages. And so when I was doing this research, it kind of almost seemed like they didn't know what to do with them. And so I'll tell you what follows. But there's actually evidence that this was a pre-planned course of action that comes out later in the trial that we'll talk about later. But what ends up happening is, for sure, I don't think they anticipated having 5 people on their hands. I think they knew there would be like 1 or 2 people that, were manning the store. But
Yeah.
they suddenly had 2 adults and 3 teenagers on their hands. And I think it freaked them out a little bit. Like, what are we supposed to do with 5 people? So after a while, Pierre, he orders Andrews to go get something from the van. And he comes back. He comes back and he has a liquid in a bottle that's hidden in like a brown paper bag. And they start with Orin, Stanley's father, and they tell him to drink it. And he's like, no, I'm not
Oh my
drinking your
gosh.
weird liquid. And
No, thank
so
you.
instead, they like gag him and they lay him face down on the floor. And then they turn to the other hostages. They sit them all up and they force them to drink this liquid. And they tell them that it's just a vodka that's laced with sleeping pills. And I honestly really wish that was the truth. That would have been like a nice
Way
ending to
better.
this. But they quickly discovered, as it burned their way down their throats, that this was Drano and that these people were forcing them to drink Drano. If you don't know what Drano is, it's the
Oh my
stuff that you put
gosh.
down a freaking sink when your sink clogs. And it's so acidic and terrible that like you can't leave it down a drain for very long without it like burning a hole through your pipes. Like you have to rinse it out of your pipes because that's how freaking terrible this stuff is. Like it literally will burn through metal. They were forced to drink it, and of course, because it's human nature, you're not going to swallow something that's hurting you. They're spitting it out. Well, this like frustrated them because they wanted them to drink the Drano and die from it. And so these two decided that they were going to get duct tape and put it in their mouth and then duct tape their mouth shut.
This is horrible.
So this is going to be a trigger warning. If you don't want to hear any more details about this, skip the next 15 to 30 seconds.
I wish I could
Um,
skip it.
yeah, I didn't want to know this. But what happened was basically because this Drano is so intense, it had already started blistering their mouths so much and pussing so much that the duct tape would literally not stick to their mouths. And so that didn't work either. So they kind of had to give up on the Drano, but before they did, they went back to Orin and tried to force him to drink the Drano again. And they did end up forcing him to get it into his mouth. And then he pretended to swallow it, held it in his mouth, and slowly let it dribble out over the next while so that he didn't actually have to swallow it. And then in order to throw them off and make them think that he had actually like been affected and was dying from it, he mimicked what the other victims had done when they had swallowed it and was like convulsing and screaming so that they would believe that he was dying from Drano even though he had never swallowed it. He just held the freaking poison in his mouth and let it slowly dribble out of his mouth so they wouldn't notice.
Oh my gosh. I have no words.
Yeah. I cannot believe that this is how they decided to try and kill these people. They had a gun with them, and they instead decided to torture them instead of just end their lives. I truly
It's so
cannot
inhumane.
imagine. It's disturbing beyond measure. Yeah. I like could not, when I was doing my research and I like read that part, I was like, I literally cannot imagine the kind of pain that is to like swallow something like that.
That is so like even the smell of Drano, because I've used Drano before. The smell of it is so strong, it makes your eyes water. Like
Yeah.
you can't even breathe it in without it being like super uncomfortable. I
No,
cannot imagine that.
it's poison. I mean, it's terrible. So when they were done with the Drano, they finally decided it wasn't going to kill anybody. The victims were not swallowing enough of it to kill them. And so Pierre became pretty upset. He was pretty pissed off and angry. And he, I think, had wanted to like watch them die slowly. I would have to imagine like that's why he must have been pissed off. I don't know. And so he decides in his rage to just start killing the hostages. And he shoots Carol, Courtney's mother, in the back of her head, and then shoots Courtney in the back of his head.
Oh my gosh.
Pierre then shoots at Oren, but misses him, and shoots another shot instead at Stanley, his son, and kills him right there in front of Oren. And when that wasn't enough, they shoot a third shot at Oren, but they miss him again, and they only graze his head.
Oh my goodness.
This
Oh my
man,
goodness.
Oren, and you'll see, by the end of this experience, they try to kill him 5 different times. 5. The Drano, then they try to shoot him twice, and then we'll get into the others. But he survives 5 attempts on his life. Apparently,
Tough
this
son
man
of a
was meant to
gun.
live. Like, he
Yeah.
was not dying today. So at this point, Pierre demands that Andrews leave the basement. And just when you think the sicko can't get any worse, he drags Michelle into a corner and demands that she takes her clothes off.
Oh
And
my gosh.
according to Oren's account of this, she was repeatedly raped over the next 30 minutes. And when Pierre decided he was done with her, he threw her over to where the other bodies were and shot her in the back of the head as well.
There are no words for how monstrous that is.
No, this guy is literally sick in the head. So once his disgusting deed is done, he tells Andrews to come back. And they both happen to notice that Oren, who they've attempted to shoot 2 times and have him drink Drano, is still not dead. And so Pierre, he looks around, he's like, what else do we got? I don't know if at this point they were out of ammunition. I don't know if these were just sickos that decided they wanted to not shoot him. I don't know. But they don't use their gun at this point, and Pierre, he grabs a piece of wire and he tries to strangle Oren while sitting on top of him. That also didn't kill him, though. I don't know if
My
the wire,
gosh.
I don't know what was up, but it didn't kill him. And at this point, he backs off again, and they're like looking around for any other like possible murder weapon to get rid of. They must have been out of ammunition. I don't understand that, but anyway, and so all they come up with is a ballpoint pen. And they grab it and they stab Oren in the ear with it hard enough that it punctures his eardrum and exits through his throat.
Oh my gosh.
I literally cannot imagine. I don't have words.
I don't have
Isn't that
what?
insanity? Yeah.
These people are
Anyway,
psychotic.
they
What is
really are.
happening?
Yeah, they're evil. They are, there's no other word. There's like, yeah, there's an evil that's like a serial killer evil. And then there's an evil of just like somebody that is just straight up psychotic and has like, yeah, just no cares in the world.
That there are people out there that just seem totally normal and then wake up one day and do stuff like this is crazy to me. That
And
it doesn't seem like there's any buildup or any signs or
no,
anything.
no.
They just
And
decide to go and do this.
what you figure out about these 3 guys is they're actually from the Hill Air Force Base. They were members of the Air Force. And
Oh my
somehow to
gosh.
me that makes it so much worse because those are like the people you would want to trust, right?
Yeah.
No. They're murdering psychopaths.
Holy-
So they leave Oren, assuming that he must be dead, and they go upstairs and they finish their robbery. They take off with $24,000 worth of audio equipment, and they leave 5 people that they assume to be dead in the basement. Luckily, it doesn't take that long for somebody to feel like something's off again, and 3 hours later, Oren's wife and his other son, his younger son, they start to get worried because Oren and Stanley, they never came home. And they can't get a hold of them. So they head over to the hi-fi shop, and luckily the 3 criminals were long gone by this point. But they do arrive, they hear noises down in the basement, and go to investigate and find the horrifying scene that was left behind.
Oh my gosh.
And they immediately call the police, who show up. When they show up on the scene, they find that Stanley and Michelle are both dead. Carol was still alive and was rushed to a local hospital, but she didn't survive the drive over there, and upon arrival at the hospital, she was pronounced dead.
Oh my goodness.
Courtney was not expected to recover. Remember, he got shot in the back of the head as well. But he made a miraculous recovery from his injuries. And after enduring 266 days of hospitalization, he was able to live life with severe brain damage. Orrin
Gosh.
survived all of his injuries and just sustained injuries to his mouth, chin, and obviously his ear, but overall was like pretty intact after
My
5 attempts on his
goodness.
life.
That guy is like my hero.
Yeah, I don't know, like some kind of a Superman. So, despite the trauma that Orrin had gone through, he was able to give a pretty good, like, detailed description of the assailants, and the police started a search. And these dumbos really, truly, and I always love saying that they're dumb when they do something so stupid that gets them caught. I'm just like, yeah. Hours after the crime made the news, an anonymous call came from the local Hill Air Force Base and told them that Andrews had been heard saying that one of these days I'm going to rob that hi-fi shop, and if anybody gets in the way, I'm going to kill them. So right off the bat, they have a pretty strong suspect. And it's almost simultaneously as getting that call that the police also get another call from 2 teenage boys that were dumpster diving just outside of Hill Air Force Base. And they contacted the police because they had found wallets and purses that belonged to the victims, and they were able to identify it as belonging to the victims because these numbskulls had left the driver's licenses in there and had dumped them. And
Oh
since
my
these
gosh.
teenagers had seen this news story, they recognized the names and immediately called the cops and were like, yeah, we found their stuff. So I think this next part is kind of funny, but the police actually show up at the scene and they start to inspect the contents of the dumpster, and they kind of make a show of it. They kind of let the Air Force personnel come out and watch them, and they kind of make a big deal. They're pulling things out of the dumpster and analyzing them. And they were basically trying to get a reaction out of somebody in the crowd. They assumed that the perps would be there, and they wanted to draw them out by getting them to react to when they pulled the stuff out of the dumpster.
Yeah.
And it worked because as this
Dang.
was going on, there's 2 men in the back that get very animated. They start to yell at each other. They start to get really aggressive. And you guessed it, it was Pierre and Andrews. So,
That's
based
so
purely
dumb.
off of their stupid reactions, the police bring them in for questioning, and they obtained a search warrant. And so they go and search these 2 men's living quarters, and they find pretty much a lot of damning evidence. They found flyers for the hi-fi shop. They found a rental contract for a storage unit nearby that had been
Hmm.
purchased only recently. And then they found a stereo that they were able to directly link back to the hi-fi shop from a serial number on it, and they knew that it had been stolen. So it's pretty damning evidence. Along with
Yeah.
that, one of the sources I read said that they also found a partially used bottle of Drano. I can't imagine that that's true.
They
That was only one
kept
source. I doubt
the
they
murder
kept.
weapon?
I don't think they would have kept the Drano. I don't think they're that dumb. But maybe they did.
I mean, yeah.
Even without the Drano, they still have pretty solid evidence that they were planning this. And so basically they have felt pretty 100% confident in these two being the people that had done it, and they arrest them. And a few weeks later, Roberts, who is the getaway car driver, was also taken into custody, and that came from another tip within the Hill Air Force Base. So these three men were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated robbery. And during their trial, it came to light that Pierre and Andrews, they had gone into the robbery with the intent to kill, and they had actually researched the cleanest methods of murder beforehand.
Is that why they picked Drano?
Yes. And so the Drano was not like something that they just thought of on the spot. They actually had settled on Drano for killing them after watching the movie Magnum Force. And apparently in that movie, there's a scene where a prostitute is forced to drink Drano and just like drops dead instantly. And they
These guys
decided
are
that
so dumb.
that was the best way to kill people. I was like, that's Hollywood, folks. I don't know what you're thinking. Of course, it's not just going to be like an instant, like drop dead. Whatever.
Well, the fact that they thought, I don't even know if they necessarily thought that was the most effective thing. It seems like they saw it. They thought, that looks cool. We're going to try that. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't seem
Yeah.
like they were like, this is like, maybe they did. Maybe they thought like, this looks like an effective way to kill somebody, and also like, we're going to kill them anyways. We should do something like that looks cool. Because they
Yeah,
had a gun. Like, why
they
would you
did.
go out of your way to just like do something weird? You have access to firearms. Just shoot them like everybody else does.
Well, yeah, and they also, they're Air Force members. They know how to use weapons. It's not like they're worried that they're gonna like. I mean, like he shot them all, like not to get gruesome, but he shot them all in the back of the head. He knew
Execution
how
style.
to kill them. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah,
like I'm worried I'm gonna make a bloody mess because I don't know how to use this. No,
exactly.
these people, yeah, they were evil. I think they wanted to watch people die in a gruesome way.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, obviously murder wasn't like their limit. Like, they raped that girl and they killed her, which is just like another layer of just like
Gross.
terribleness.
Yeah.
And this was all premeditated. This wasn't just like, show up, the robbery goes wrong, we have to kill them to get away with it. No, they
No.
showed up intending to kill people.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yep.
horrible.
Exactly. And so Orrin was actually the star witness against them in this case. And I
Orin.
like personally was like, that's great. I bet that was like so satisfying to him to be able to be like the main reason that these guys got locked up.
Yep.
And so anyway, so he was like their star witness. Courtney was not able to testify due to his brain injuries, but his father, Brian Naisbitt, did testify basically on his behalf. And so on November 16th of 1974, that's about 6 months after this crime was committed, this trial happened super fast. That doesn't seem typical for this kind of stuff, but their trial was like a speedy one. And Andrews and Pierre, they were both found guilty of both counts of three counts of first-degree murder and the aggravated robbery charges. But Roberts was only found guilty of the armed robbery charges.
Because he didn't go in the building, right? He just waited
No.
outside.
No, he was not part of any of the murders, technically.
Okay.
So,
Okay. He knew they were
Roberts
happening,
was,
though.
yes, he was part of the whole plan. But Roberts was given 5 years to life, but after serving 13 years, he was paroled in 1987. And then Pierre and Andrews were actually given the death penalty by lethal injection.
I mean,
And
it seems like, yeah, that would be on the table.
And it was ruled really quickly, like 4 days after their sentencing. They were like, the judge was like, "You're dying. You're done."
Gosh.
So, Pierre was actually executed the same year that Roberts was released in 1987. Andrews was executed 5 years later, in 1992 due to the fact that he kept trying to fight the charges against him and claimed racism because he was black. And so he
Okay.
claimed racism as the reason that he was even getting the death penalty. He claimed that if it had been a white man, that would not have been the case. I was like, no, sir, you're an animal, and that is why you are getting the death penalty.
Yeah,
Because you
you did
cruelly
things.
tortured and murdered 5 people. Well, 3 people. Tried to torture
Yeah.
and murder 5 people. So, that is kind of the end of them. Orrin and Courtney, they lived for years after this. Orrin Walker, he was, him and his family, they were hugely impacted by this incident. Obviously, they lost their son. And so their younger son, he became so terrified because remember he went to the hi-fi shop with his mother. He became so terrified that he slept in his parents' room on a mattress for months after this, and for
I can't
years refused to
imagine.
go into their family's basement.
The PTSD from that would be unreal. I can't
Oh
even.
yeah, no, it would just be insane. And Orrin said that most of his wife's life was just spent trying to forget that night, which I can imagine. Like, she had to witness that scene, and yeah. Orrin lived to be 69 before passing away, and he passed away in 2000. So he actually lived a pretty long life considering. And until the day he died, he claimed that the men involved in the crime had gotten what they deserved. And he actually said in an interview that as he had watched the crime like unfold, Pierre especially had seemed to enjoy what he was doing. Like after he shot the first 2 victims, he actually did like what Orrin described was almost like a happy dance. And so Orrin was like, yes, I 100% agree with like what was dealt to them. I think that they like truly enjoyed trying to cause pain to people. So that's Orrin. Courtney, he goes on to finish high school despite his brain damage. He takes like a year off and then he finishes high school, which I think is very incredible. I cannot imagine
Yeah.
that kind of trauma. And then on top of that, like deciding that despite your like literal brain injury, you're going to go back and do school. So, because he was only
It's pretty
16, it just
impressive.
breaks my
Yeah.
heart. He had his whole life ahead of him, and it was just ripped away by these psychopath, stupid heads. So, like, I'm
Yeah.
not good at insults, but if I had them. Anyway, but he actually tries to attend college after he graduates high school. And sadly, he was forced to drop out due to his brain damage. He basically just was not able to function well enough to complete college. But I think that's so cool. That was probably his goal before this happened, and I think that that's amazing that he would try and still go and like live his life to the fullest.
Yeah.
Um Sadly, for similar reasons because of his brain injuries, he was not able to hold down any jobs, and he was forced to live for the rest of his life on Social Security. But he did end up getting married to a woman named Catherine Hunter in 1985. So about 10 years after this. He suffered chronic pain for the rest of his life, and he did end up dying in 2002 at only 44 years old.
Dang.
So it's pretty sad. I'm sure that was due to his injuries.
Yeah. That's
I mean, it's
terrible.
freaking phenomenal that he survived. Like, honestly, I can't
Oh,
imagine. I
yeah.
mean, he was shot in the back of the head. People don't survive that.
No, they
So,
don't. And
um,
it's really cool. It's really cool that he, like, made the most of his life, even though I'm sure there were, like, so many setbacks and, like, things that were
yeah,
just so hard about living with that kind of injury. It's cool that he still got
yeah,
married and he tried to do all the things that he wanted to do before it happened. Pretty cool.
yeah. Well, and
Impressive.
it's like you can just kind of tell his character. Like, the reason he was in this situation was because he was trying to be nice to somebody. Like, he was just trying to be polite and be a good person. And you can see that that's just who he was. Like, he was gonna live his life and he was gonna do the best with what he had. And I'm sure I can't even imagine how incredibly difficult it would be, but I'm sure he seemed like the kind of person that was just like looking on the bright side and like he was gonna do what he could with what he had. So,
Yeah.
his father, the one that actually testified in the trial, who had lost his wife Carol, right? He actually, I thought, I don't know, it was kind of nice, little happy tidbit. He was able to remarry later, and he is a doctor for babies. He
Baby
delivers
doctor.
babies, and he like went on to deliver like hundreds of babies with his job as a doctor after that. And so it's like a little happy tidbit. Like, even though there was all this suffering, there was good people involved in this that are still doing good things out in the world. And yeah, that's the end of the sickening hi-fi murders. It's kind of a shorter episode.
Yeah, that is truly horrifying. Truly horrifying.
I literally could not sleep the night that I did the initial research on this. I was like, what kind of world do we live in where like people just go into a public place and do that? I was just like, this is not okay. I'm not okay right now. I'm
Yeah.
having a crisis.
Having a real moment. It seemed to me like Pierre was kind of like the ringleader. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, it seemed
It
like
seems
it
like,
because he kind of like demanded that Andrew leave at one time, and he told Andrew to go get something out of the car. Like, it seems like he was kind of the head honcho.
which is just so that people can get like that people like this find each other. People that are willing to do this sort of thing somehow group together like a pack of wolves is just mind-boggling. It happens over and over and over again. We'll eventually cover some cases where couples are the ones that do stuff like this. Like somehow they find each other and
Yeah.
they fall, quote unquote, fall in love, and then do all of these horrible things to people. I just don't understand how people like this find each other and like are willing to do this kind of thing. It blows my mind
Yeah,
that
no,
people
it's
are like,
terrible. I just
Pierre
like,
has this idea. He wants to kill people with Drano and also make some money from the radio shop, whatever. No. No. Okay. Anyways,
well, and it's
they
like,
got what was coming to
I'm
them.
glad, like, while this like story is so terrible, it's like touching to see how much people cared though, because you have like these teenagers who had parents that were like on the ball and were like, where is my child? I'm gonna go find them. And like, even though that ended up being like the end of Carol's life, like, I'm sure she would never regret her decision to go
No.
and try to save her son, and
And
I
she
just,
probably like and not that she necessarily saved him, but he survived.
yeah. And it's
Like
like, who knows? And so, yeah,
yeah.
I think that like that's good. I think about like the people at like Hill Air Force Base that like stepped up and turned these men in. They weren't afraid to be like, I know who did this. I know exactly who did this. And then those
Yeah.
teenagers, like some teenagers freaking, I mean, not to be this person, but there are teenagers out in the world that freaking kill people and just don't talk about it ever. But there's some good teenagers that found some solid evidence that like brought these people to justice, and they like called the cops immediately. And like that was like I feel like it was just like a lot of things that went the right way to get these men, yeah,
Behind
taken to
bars.
justice. So,
Yep.
not even behind
That's
bars,
crazy.
freaking just
It's crazy to imagine this
executed.
because I've probably been in the building where this happened. Like I have been like on Washington Boulevard. I worked like literally around the block from there for like 6 months at a
Yeah.
hotel. And I'm pretty sure that building where the hi-fi murders took place is like a Five Guys now, or right by a Five Guys. It's like right,
Is it really?
literally right around. I think it's right there.
Oh my gosh. I think you're right.
So I've been in that Five Guys. I've eaten there.
Yeah, I have too.
So I don't know. It's
Yeah,
just kind
that's
of crazy to think like that's what happened there, or at least somewhere near there that I've probably been to.
so
Bonkers.
terrible. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I don't know. I think like one of the biggest trad.
Lila can't say tragedy. It's
I
hilarious.
literally cannot. I always say trad.
Strategy.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying not to say it, but you know what I'm trying to say. One of the biggest one of those is the fact that
Tragedies.
thank you. I just like Michelle because she's 18, she's in love. She's like literally like she's supposed to get married in August. And this happened in like April. So she's literally months away from getting married. And she just meets the most horrible end. And it's like she's just about to start her life. And I can only imagine her poor fiance that had to go through that. Yeah. Anyway, I
Seriously.
didn't bring her up at the end. So I was like, I just wanted to like throw some light on her
Yeah.
because that's terrible.
So many lives just twisted all around because these guys decided to just replicate something they saw on a TV one time.
Yep. So
Great stuff.
there you have
That
it.
was sarcasm in case anybody was wondering. It's not great stuff.
I got that, but
Good. I'm glad. I just didn't want there to be any confusion.
I'm
Oh
not
goodness.
actually saying that. Yep, there you go. This is a
Well,
shorter episode. I did it. Usually I
you did.
drag on for like an hour and a half, but we got this down to 50
Not
minutes, y'all.
this time.
Thanks for
50
listening.
minutes. Yes, thanks for listening and catch us next week. We'll be here. We hope you will be too. Until then, follow us on social media. We're on Instagram at for criming out loud _podcast. We're on Twitter at criming out loud. We have a Gmail. Gmail us. We like Gmails. It's a for criming out loud at gmail.com. We have a website for crimingoutloud.com. Like us, share us, just comment on things, message us, whatever. We'd love to hear from you. Until then,
Join us next
we'll
week.
talk to you next week. Bye.